Be a bit overwhelming at first. I'll say the days of the week again. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. How does it sound? Just be careful you're not going to knock them off. Can you hear my voice coming through both sides?
It was a woman hearing for the first time.
Deaf person hearing for the first time.
Deaf person hearing for the first time.
Deaf person hearing for the first time.
In my head, I can say that cochlear implants don't restore full hearing to a deaf person because that's impossible. And although they are good medicine, they portray the medical point of how deaf people are viewed, and not all deaf people strive to be hearing.
I know cochlear implants are an implant in the ear that can help deaf people learn to hear, and I know they're usually implanted when they are babies.
I know that one thing is part of the ear, and for my assumption, you can replace it.
Cochlear implants are usually the parents' choice, and the parents tend to be hearing. They usually get them when they're babies, so it's not really the person's choice, and I know there's a lot of negative feelings around the cochlear implants.
Personally, I am against implants if it's not going to help you at all, because many deaf people get cochlear implants and don't decide to utilize them because they just figure it's a hassle. So I don't see the point if they want to remain deaf culturally and medically.
I feel like this information can be used to defend both sides.
And for cochlear implants,
I'm against cochlear implants because I feel like they're trying to change the deaf person into something they're not, and usually it's not their choice, so I'm against.
This does not change my view on implants because I've already known this information. So again, I don't think that cochlear implants should be implemented when they're not needed.
No, this doesn't really change my view on the cochlear implant because, again, it's voluntary and you can choose to use it or not.
I feel that it's a waste of money because why would you get it and then not use it? There's a point on why you got it.
This doesn't change my views because if you're not going to use it, then what was the point for that needless surgery?
I'm well aware that the deaf community is against cochlear implants because that's not only stripping away their deafness, it's stripping away their deaf culture, and cochlear implants are medicine's attempt to make deaf people fit into a hearing world, and that's why they don't enjoy being forced to have a cochlear implant.
Yes, I did know that.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes, I did know that the deaf community was against cochlear implants.
I think a hearing person would give their deaf child a cochlear implant because they're scared of the uncertainties that come with deafness, especially when they're not educated in deaf culture and deaf society and how it is used as an outlet for deaf people to express and communicate with sign language and many other things. And they're not open to the possibility of bilingual communication with sign language and oralism. They just want their deaf child to assimilate into only a hearing culture. So a deaf person most likely would only give their deaf child a cochlear implant because they themselves asked for it or they've considered it themselves, because from an early age deaf people are educated on what the consequences or causes and effects of cochlear implants are. So if the deaf child themselves had said they want a cochlear implant, that's probably the situation involved when they get a cochlear implant. Or if the deaf person is not culturally deaf and they also want to make their child quote unquote hear, and usually if the deaf adult has a cochlear implant, they'll probably make their child get a cochlear implant.
I feel like a hearing parent would want their child to be able to hear, especially since they can't understand what it's like being deaf and not being able to hear. And I feel like since they're less understanding, they just want their child to be what is considered normal. And if a deaf parent would want their child to get a cochlear implant, they're probably trying to do what they think is best for the child and trying to give them a better than what they
They
had.
would like their child to hear and make it more easy for them to communicate.
A hearing parent would most likely want to get their child a cochlear implant because they're trying to make them normal like them. And deaf parents, if they want to do it, it's great. They're probably trying to give their kid more opportunities than they feel they had.
If I had a deaf child, I would not force them to have a cochlear implant from an early age, mostly because I've been fortunate enough to learn about the deaf culture and the deaf community and the consequences of cochlear implants. And later in life, if my child had asked me for a cochlear implant, I would let them because they themselves are educated and it's their choice. But I believe that deaf people can do anything a hearing person can, and just because they have a cochlear implant, that doesn't mean it's going to define them and how they're going to do in a hearing
If
world.
I had a deaf child, I would probably wait till they were old enough to make that decision on their
I
own.
would buy my child the implant and I would influence them to use it.
If I had a deaf child, I wouldn't get them a cochlear implant, but if they wanted one, I would consider it.
If a deaf individual decides they want to get a cochlear implant, or if a deaf child is forced to get a cochlear implant, I think it's important for people to understand the pathological and cultural views of the deaf community and how that could possibly impact them, because as soon as a deaf child gets a cochlear implant, then they're not fully deaf and they're not fully hearing, so it'd be hard for them. And I think that cochlear implants, the medicine and the technology is really advanced, and that's great, but at the same time, you shouldn't force a deaf person to do something they don't want to do, which a lot of times they are forced to get a cochlear implant, mostly because deaf children are born to hearing parents who don't know what to do with them. And I don't think my views have changed on cochlear implants because I've already been educated on how it affects a deaf individual, because I've been fortunate enough to take the sign language course on campus, and that's it.
I feel like it's up to the deaf person themselves to decide what they want to do with their life and their situation, and my views haven't really changed.
I know more about the implant that I started with.
Final thoughts are, I still don't support cochlear implants, and no, my views have not changed.